Sawate Omnes, and welcome to our second to last chapter lecture. Today we will be focusing on Wheelock Chapter 39, which gives a review of the gerundive and introduces the related gerund. Let's begin. Before I introduce the gerund, let's do a quick review of the gerundive, or future passive participle. This is a verbal adjective formed by adding the endings endus and endum to the present stem of a verb. Its cookie-cutter translation is to be verbed or about to be verbed. This can be seen in the example, liber legendus, or a book to be read, or a book about to be read. However, it is commonly employed with a form of sum esse in the passive periphrastic, or gerundive of obligation construction. This can be seen in the example, hic liber legendus est, or this book must be read. The gerundive is related to the gerund, which is a verbal noun. It looks exactly like the gerundive, except there is one big difference. It only has 4 forms: the neuter, singular, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative. Unlike the gerund is active in meaning and corresponds to the English gerund ing. Its cookie-cutter translation is verbing, but as a noun, not an adjective. It can be modified as a verb with adverbs, complementary infinitives, direct objects, etc., and used as a noun in the various cases. It has no nominative, and the gerund is never used as a subject. If a Latin author wanted to speak about a verb in the nominative, they used the infinitive. This is seen in the example sentence, errare est humanum, where the present active infinitive errare is acting as the subject of the verb est. To err is human. Before we move on to declining the gerund, it should also be noted that the accusative is frequently employed as the object of the preposition odd, and sometimes as the object of other prepositions, but it will never be a direct object. Now let's take a look at the declension of the gerunds from 3 different verbs, laudo, sequor, and audio. The gerund for laudo is as follows. There is no nominative, of course. The genitive is laudandi, and would be translated as of praising. The dative is laudando, and would be translated as to or for praising. The accusative is laudandum, and would be translated as praising. The ablative is laudando, and will be translated as by praising. The gerund for sequor is as follows. No nominative. The genitive is sequendi and is translated as of following. The dative is sequendo and is translated as to or for following. The accusative is sequendum and is translated as following. The ablative is sequendo and is translated as by following. Finally, the gerunds of audio. No nominative. The genitive is audendi and is translated as of hearing. The dative is audiendo and is translated as to or for hearing. The accusative is audiendum and is translated as hearing. And the ablative is audiendo and is translated as by hearing. Now let's look at some examples of the gerund in use. In our first example, studium vivendi cum amicis habet, vivendi is the neuter genitive singular gerund. It is showing possession over the noun studium. Studium vivendi is translated as a passion for living. It is modified with the prepositional phrase cum amicis. This whole sentence is translated as she has a fondness of or a fondness for living with friends. In the sentence bene vivendo operem dot, vivendo is the neuter dative singular gerund. It is acting as the indirect object of the verb dot, with operum as the direct object. It is modified by the adverb bene and translated as to living well. The whole sentence is then translated, he gives attention to living well. In this sentence, ad bene vivendum Athenas eat, vivendum is the neuter accusative singular gerund. Since gerunds can't be direct objects, it is instead acting as the object of the preposition ad and modified by the adverb bene. The prepositional phrase is translated as to live well, and the whole sentence as, she went to Athens to live well. This is a special function of the gerund with the preposition ad that we will be learning about shortly. Finally, in the sentence bene vivendo feliciores fimus, vivendo is the neuter singular ablative gerund. It is modified by the adverb bene and has the function of an ablative of means. It is translated as by living well, and the whole sentence as, we become happier by living well. At this point, you may be wondering how you're supposed to differentiate the gerund and the gerundive. Let's look at their traits in comparison. The gerund is a verbal noun, which means that, in theory, an adjective could agree with it. This is a big difference from the gerundive, which is a verbal adjective. As an adjective, it will agree in gender, case, and number with some other noun or pronoun in the sentence. The gerund only has 4 forms: neuter genitive singular, dative singular, accusative singular, and ablative singular, whereas the gerundive, as an adjective, has a full set of masculine, feminine, and neuter endings in both the singular and plural in all 5 cases. Finally, the gerund is active while the gerundive is passive. However, while these are some great distinctions, the Romans used the gerund and gerundive rather interchangeably. As we saw in our example sentences, as a verbal noun, the gerund may take the case construction required by its verb. Both legendi and legendo in the sample sentences here take accusative direct objects. However, in practice, when the gerund would take an accusative direct objects, the Romans preferred to put the noun that would have been the direct object into the case that the gerund should be in and modify it with a gerundive. For example, in the sentence studium legendi libros habet, as mentioned before, legendi has the direct object of libros, and the sentence is translated as, she has a fondness of reading books. However, the Romans would prefer the sentence to be written as studium librorum legendorum habet. The books which were the direct object of the gerund in the first sentence are shifted to the genitive plural and are now modified by the genitive plural gerundive legendorum. This sentence is translated exactly the same as the previous one. She has a fondness of reading books. The same thing happens with the sentence libros legendo discimus. We learn by reading books. The Romans would much rather this be libris legendis discimus. Finally, gerunds and gerundives are often used to denote purpose in 2 different ways. The first is the accusative with the preposition ad. We saw this already, but here is another example. Both ad legendum libros venit and ad libros legendos venit translates as he came to read books. The first one uses the accusative gerund with the direct object libros, while the second one is the preferred noun gerundive phrase in the accusative plural. Gerunds and gerundives are also used in the genitive with the postpositive causa to show purpose. Remember, causa plus the genitive at the beginning of a sentence means for the sake of. Both legendi libros causa otium petit and librorum legendorum causa otium petit translate as, she seeks leisure for the sake of reading books. The first one uses the genitive singular gerund legendi with the direct object libros, while the second one uses the preferred noun gerundive phrase in the genitive plural. Finally, let's do a practice parsing, identifying, and translating sentence. Consul, we are maximi dignitatis, otium consumere solet in operibus sublimis scribendis. There is only one verb in this sentence, the third person singular present active indicative main verb solet. It is complemented by the present active complementary infinitive consumere. The subject of solet is the masculine nominative singular consul, which is described by the masculine nominative singular wir in apposition. This wir is also modified by the feminine genitive singular maximi dignitatis, which is what is known as a genitive of description. We will learn more about this next week. The direct object of solet consumere is the neuter accusative singular otium. This leaves us with the prepositional phrase in operibus sublimibus scribendis. The noun that is the object of the preposition is the neuter ablative plural operibus, which is modified by the neuter ablative plural adjective sublimibus and the neuter ablative plural gerundive scribendis. If we put this all together, the sentence is translated as, the consul, a man of the greatest dignity, is accustomed to spend his leisure in writing heroic works. That's all for this chapter, folks. Please be sure to get your form sentences done by Thursday, end of day, and the chapter worksheet by Friday, end of day. Your quiz will go live Friday at 10:10 a.m. And finally, please feel free to join me for sight reading this Friday at 10:10 a.m. Volte omnes!